They set me up on a blind date with my boss. But my reaction left the room in tears. The night my coworkers set me up on a blind date, I walked into that restaurant as a senior marketing analyst with nothing to lose. But the moment my blind date walked through that door, everything changed, because standing there, scanning the room with those composed grey-green eyes that had run every Monday morning briefing for 3 years, was Claire Whitfield. My boss. The VP of Marketing. The most untouchable, most quietly unreachable woman in our entire building. She saw me. I saw her. And for one single unguarded second, the most composed woman I had ever known looked like she might turn around and never look back. But she didn't. She sat down across from me anyway. What happened next at that dinner table, one comment, one moment, one reaction nobody in that room saw coming, didn't just silence every person at that table. It left them in tears. Here is what nobody tells you about being set up on a blind date with your own boss. The real danger was never the awkwardness, the power gap, or even what our coworkers would say on Monday morning. The real danger was that I had quietly seen her, truly seen her, long before that night. But had she ever let anyone see her back? And what exactly did I say that turned a room full of witnesses into tears? My name is Daniel Harlow. I'm 31 years old. I'm not the loudest man in any room. I'm not the one who tells the best stories at the company happy hour or makes the whole table laugh before the appetizers arrive. But I pay attention. I always have. It's the thing that makes me good at my job and occasionally terrible at pretending I don't notice things I probably shouldn't. And for 3 years, without ever saying a word about it to anyone, I had been noticing Claire Whitfield. Not in the way people assume when they find out your boss is an attractive woman. It wasn't that simple, and honestly, it was never really about that at all. It was the way she'd walk into a Monday briefing carrying the weight of decisions none of us ever saw her make, and still ask every single person in that room how their weekend went before opening her laptop. It was the way she corrected you when you were wrong, not to embarrass you, but in a quiet, precise way that made you feel like being corrected by her was actually a gift. It was the way she'd stand at the conference room window on difficult afternoons, coffee going cold in her hand, looking out at the Chicago skyline like she was having a conversation with it that nobody else was invited to. She was brilliant. Everybody knew that. But I had noticed something else. Something the performance reviews and client presentations never showed. Claire Whitfield was lonely. Not broken. Not damaged. Not fragile. Just lonely, in the specific, quiet way that powerful people get lonely when they've spent so long being capable that everyone around them forgets they're also human. I never told anyone that. It wasn't mine to tell. But I remembered it the night Priya Nair sat on the edge of my desk with that particular smile she wore when she was about to rearrange someone's life without their permission. I know someone, she said. No, I said, without looking up from my screen. She's smart. Interesting. Completely different field. She paused strategically. She has excellent taste in restaurants. That's not a personality trait. It absolutely is one. I said no for more times over the following week. Priya had the persistence of someone who genuinely believed she was doing God's work. By Friday, I had agreed to dinner the following Saturday, mostly because agreeing was the only path back to silence. Small group, she called after me as I walked away. Totally casual. I should have turned around right then. I should have asked her why she was smiling like that. But I didn't. And that Saturday evening, I put on a clean navy jacket, drove to Linden & Company, an upscale restaurant downtown where the candles were intentional and the menu font cost more than my first car, and walked through the door with absolutely no idea that the next 2 hours were going to change the entire shape of my life. The table was already half full when I arrived. Priya and her husband Marcus. Jordan Webb from Creative. Tessa Alcott from Client Relations. All people I knew. All people currently studying their menus, their phones, and the middle distance with the concentrated effort of individuals pretending they weren't watching the door. There were 2 empty chairs. One for me. One for someone who hadn't arrived yet. I sat down. I looked at Priya. She smiled with every muscle in her face except her eyes. She's running a few minutes late, Priya said. Traffic. Marcus nodded. Traffic, he confirmed, unnecessarily. I looked at Jordan. He looked at his bread plate. I looked at Tessa. She smiled at her water glass. Something cold moved through my stomach. What's going on? I said. Nothing's going on, Priya said. Have some bread. And then the door opened. And the temperature of that entire room changed. Because Claire Whitfield, my boss, the VP of marketing, the woman who had never once in 3 years looked anything less than completely in control of every room she entered, walked in wearing a charcoal wrap dress and a quiet kind of beauty she clearly hadn't dressed up for anyone's benefit, scanning the restaurant with those grey-green eyes. Until they found me. And stopped. The silence between us lasted maybe 3 seconds. But those 3 seconds felt like the entire restaurant held its breath. Claire's composure came back fast. It always did. Like a curtain being drawn, smooth, practiced, and so quick you almost doubted you'd seen what was behind it. She straightened, walked toward the table with the same quiet authority she carried into every boardroom, and sat down across from me like she had made a decision nobody else was allowed to vote on. The table exhaled. For the next 20 minutes, everyone performed normalcy with the desperate energy of people who knew they'd done something they couldn't take back. Priya talked too much. Marcus laughed too loud. Jordan refilled his water glass 3 times without drinking from it. And Claire participated with the smooth, effortless courtesy of someone who had survived 1,000 uncomfortable rooms. I watched her do it. I recognized it immediately. She was managing the situation. Containing it. Keeping everything at a safe, professional distance. But then Jordan opened his mouth. He leaned back, grinning, and said, loud enough for the whole table, "So Danny. Bit of a power move, hitting it off with the VP, yeah? That's one way to fast-track a performance review." He laughed. Nobody else did. I watched Claire's hand tighten around her fork. And I felt it, that precise shift in the air that tells you this is the moment. Not the awkward arrival. Not the setup. This. Right here. I set my fork down slowly. "Jordan," I said quietly. "I need you to hear what you just said." His grin flickered. "You just implied the only reason a man would sit across from Claire Whitfield at dinner is professional advantage." I paused. Think about how small that is. The table went completely still. I turned, not to the room, not to the audience who had arranged this whole evening like a social experiment. I turned directly to Claire. And I spoke only to her. "I have worked for you for 3 years, I said. I have watched you walk into rooms where people had already decided your value before you opened your mouth. I've watched you carry the weight of an entire department without once making it someone else's problem. I've watched you deliver hard truths to people who needed them, even when silence would have been easier. I didn't stop. And I've watched you eat lunch alone at your desk on days the whole office went out together. Because somewhere along the way, you decided that being the leader meant keeping a careful distance from everyone around you. Nobody breathed. So no," I said, glancing back at Jordan one last time. "It's not a power move. It's dinner with a woman I have quietly respected for 3 years and never had the right moment to actually talk to." The restaurant noise dissolved. And Claire Whitfield, composed, guarded, brilliant, quietly lonely Claire, looked at me with eyes that had gone dangerously bright. Her voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. "That is the most accurate thing anyone has said about me in years." Priya made a soft sound. Tessa turned her face away. Even steady, unshakable Marcus pressed his lips together hard and stared at the table. The whole room quietly came apart. And if your chest is tight right now, stay with me. Because what happened after that silence is the part nobody at that table saw coming. Not Priya. Not Jordan. Not even Claire. But first, if this story is already moving you, hit subscribe right now and turn on that notification bell, so you never miss what's coming next. Nobody moved for what felt like a full minute. Then, one by one, the table slowly remembered how to breathe. Jordan stared at his plate like it owed him an apology. Priya wiped the corner of her eye with the back of her hand and pretended she hadn't. Marcus cleared his throat 3 times and solved nothing. And Claire picked up her water glass, took one slow sip, and set it down with the careful precision of someone buying herself exactly enough time to rebuild her walls before anyone noticed they had crumbled. But I had noticed. And something told me she knew that. Dinner continued. Quieter now. Softer around the edges. The cruelty had been removed from the room like a splinter, and what was left underneath was surprisingly, unexpectedly warm. Claire asked me questions. Real ones. Not the performance review kind. She wanted to know what book I'd recommend to someone who claimed they hated reading. She wanted to know whether I believed people could genuinely change or whether they just got better at hiding who they already were. I told her both could be true depending on how much pain was involved. She looked at me like that answer had landed somewhere specific inside her. By the time the check arrived, the table felt nothing like it had 2 hours earlier. But it was what happened outside that I will never forget for the rest of my life. The Chicago night was cool and clear. That specific kind of autumn air that makes everything feel slightly more significant than usual. Or maybe exactly as significant as it actually is. Claire stood on the sidewalk, coat folded over one arm, and said, "I need to tell you something." "Okay," I said. "I have a rule about professional relationships." She said it evenly. No drama. But I heard the weight behind every single word. It exists because a few years ago, someone I trusted used my position to make his own life easier. By the time I understood what was happening, she paused. It cost me considerably. I didn't rush past it. Didn't try to fix it or minimize it. "That makes complete sense," I said. "I'm not telling you to be discouraging." Her gray-green eyes held mine steadily. "I'm telling you so you understand why I'm going to be slow." "I'm not in a hurry," I said. She studied my face for a long moment. Searching for the catch. Looking for the angle. Finding neither. And something in her, quietly, carefully, let go. "Coffee," she said finally. "Not this week. But soon." "Soon works," I said. She almost smiled. "You're going to make this complicated, aren't you?" "Probably," I said. But I'd rather navigate complicated honestly than avoid something real altogether. This time, she actually smiled. Small, and slow, and completely unguarded. And it was the most beautiful thing I had seen in 3 years of watching her. Soon became coffee. Coffee became a walk through the art district that lasted 3 hours longer than either of us planned. That walk became dinner. Dinner became the kind of quiet Sunday mornings that make you realize you've stopped counting how many there have been because losing count feels like exactly the right thing. 14 months later, I met her at the spot where she'd first told me she was going to be slow. I had a ring. She had no idea. When she turned around and saw me, her hand went to her mouth. And Claire Whitfield, the most composed woman I had ever known, stood on that Chicago sidewalk and cried without trying to stop herself for the very first time. She said yes before I finished the sentence. And later, when people asked us how we met, Claire would smile and say, "Our coworkers set us up badly." Then I'd add, "But they accidentally gave us the best night of our lives." Here's what I want to ask you: have you ever been truly seen by someone before you gave them permission to look? And what would you have done if your blind date turned out to be the one person you never expected? Tell me your story in the comments below. And if this one moved you, if any part of it hit somewhere deep, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Hit that subscribe button right now and turn on the notification bell, because every single week, this channel brings you stories exactly like this one. Stories about real people, real moments, and the kind of love that doesn't announce itself until it's already changed everything. I'll see you in the next one.